So welcome to the International Language Coaching Association. This is the second event in this series we named Expert 2020 series, and welcome to everyone listening to this live or as a recording. And Carrie McKinnon is here, and another founding member of ILCA who is actually going to do the presenting, Duncan Foord. So welcome and thank you very much for being here.
Hello.
And we have another founding member, Judy Thompson, here, and we have participants, Alessandra. So what I like to say is it's going to be about 1 hour with Q&A at the end. And of course, if you want to ask anything in between, there will be spaces, intervals for that. So Duncan has been generous and said that that would be totally okay. So you can use the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and just ask, okay? Carrie has an announcement concerning ILCA issues. If you'd like to just say that then, please.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to, while we have this opportunity and this is being recorded, other people that are here might know these things, might not. We have some exciting updates to our website. So you might have seen already, if you're on our newsletter subscription list, that we have increased the frequency of our newsletter. We're now sending it out twice a month instead of once a month, because so much is happening that we have so much more to add and to tell you guys. So you can look out for that twice a month. On the website, we have added an events page. That events page is linked to our ILCA calendar, and on that calendar we fill in not just happenings for ILCA, but for all of our founding members. So any of our founding members that have an online event or maybe even a local event that send us their information, it goes into our calendar so that you can see what's happening all over the world and in all the different strands of language coaching in different areas. So that's on the events page. It just says ILCA events on the website. And most exciting, there is now an enrollment button at the top of that page. So for these expert 2020 series talks, expert series 2020, you can go there and actually enroll just by clicking on that, and then it's an automatic process for you. So that's all. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for the updates. Basically, we truly hope that it's going to be a relevant and practical 45-50 minutes today. And whether you're live or watching, you can ask your questions. You can send it to us in email if that's something comes up which is really striking you as you need an answer to this. Then just send it to us. Okay. Duncan, I don't know, I'd like to introduce you very briefly. So you're the director of Oxford TEFL in Barcelona. I'd like you to say 1 or 2 words about what your activities are, if that's okay, and then we can move on to the talk. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I'm the director of Oxford TEFL Barcelona, which is the teacher training part of the company, which is also called Oxford House, so we have language classes in English, teaching English and Spanish language to local people in Barcelona. And then we have Oxford TEFL, which is our more international teacher training branch, where we run CELTA courses, Trinity Diploma courses, online teacher development courses, leadership courses, which is the one I'm mainly interested in. So that's kind of what we do.
All right. Okay, wonderful. And you've got, immense experience in this field, and you're also the author of 2 or 3, 4 books. I'm not quite sure. I've lost count. One of them is From English Teacher to Learner Coach, which I really recommend everyone to if they're interested in language coaching. And the rest is on our website. And anyone can reach you. There will be a website, email address for you at the end of the slides, right? So we'll just move on. Okay. Fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. Up to you then. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you for inviting me to do this talk. I must apologize before I begin. I've got a very bad cold, you may have noticed. I think I might have to stop at some point to cough or blow my nose. I'll try and do it in pair work and off screen, but I think it's better to continue. I notice a few of you have got coughs as well, so maybe it's just that time of year. Yeah. We're not so... Obviously, I'm welcome to the people who are here and the people who are watching it as a recording. But you're welcome to join in and even use your video as the people actually present. And we're not such a huge group that we can't do that. So turn your video on if you've got a question, or turn it on all the time if you want. That's fine. And sort of wave if you've got a question. But I'll try and sort of pause after each slide to give you a chance to talk. Yeah, that way. We'll stop after about 45 or 50 minutes and see how it goes. Okay.
Okay, fine. I'll just move myself from here and stop my video also. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, the talk is called "Give Your Teaching a Coaching Twist." I'm aware that, I mean, coaching means a lot of different things to a lot of different people in the association. We've already sort of seen that through the debates and the different definitions there are, and the discussion about that. So I'm just going to give my take on it, really, not to say that it's better or worse, but just that this is how I've come to coaching. This is my story. This is why I use the word coaching, and you're free to, you know, to question that and ask me about it. But I don't have any claims to having any definitive or definition of coaching, if you like, or approach. Okay. This is, I mean, I think I'm going to talk about how I'm going to refer to the book that you mentioned earlier, Gabriella, from English Teacher to Learner Coach, not just to plug the book, but because really that's kind of where all the stuff about coaching that I wrote with Dan Barber is, and this talk is kind of based on that. Okay. And just sort of give you an idea of what our thinking was and why we did it and what came out of it and the sort of activities we do with students. Okay, that's the kind of thrust of this. Bear in mind, my context, as I said, is I work in the language school. There it is, Oxford House, Oxford TEFL, the teacher training part. There's a typical class there. So we've got classes where there's 8, 10 students. Sometimes there are smaller groups. There's one-to-one classes as well. Typical language school kind of stuff, and we've got Spanish classes as well, and the groups are fairly international. They're not just Spanish people learning English. We actually, because Barcelona's got a lot of other nationalities in it, we have Chinese, Russians, Japanese, all sorts, Italians learning English together here. So it's quite an international atmosphere and very diverse in that sense, and the needs are diverse. And so a lot of what I'm talking about comes from that experience of working in that school, being the director of school, seeing how students learn, observing classes, observing teachers and students, and kind of thinking, this is what Dan and I did, thinking about what was maybe missing or what we felt could happen, and also reflecting on our own teaching and our own students. So it's a kind of combination of those two things. It doesn't come from theory. I'm not a qualified coach. I haven't studied coaching. I've read a lot about it, and I've taken an interest in it, and I've taken a lot of interest in leadership, which is something I kind of talk about and write about as well. So I think the two things match together, but I don't pretend to be or claim to be an expert in that sense, or a qualified coach, life coach, English, any other kind of coach, but we'll maybe talk about that a bit later, what that might mean. The book I referred to is there. This is an ebook. It's called English Teacher to Learner Coach. You can get it on Amazon or Smashwords. And a lot of the ideas and more from what I'm going to say now are in there. There's actually 2 bits to it. There's like a teacher's book and a student's book, and you can get the 2 together. But it only costs about €4 or €5 online. And all the money goes to a charity, actually, Cystic Fibrosis. So if you're interested, you can download a copy quite easily and get kind of more of it. And as Gabriella said, there's a link on the ILCA website as well to it, I think. Okay, so just in case you want to sort of follow up afterwards. Also, I'll share this PowerPoint with people and my email address if people want to ask me any questions, okay? I mean, going back to that image and sort of what I think my take on coaching really comes from the idea of coaching as in sports coaching. It's quite interesting that often we use different words, well in English we do, to describe teachers. So we have English teachers, but tennis coaches. And sometimes we have tutors as well. And mentors. So there's a lot of different words used to describe different things. I don't know what this guy is, Marian Badic. I don't know if you know him. He's a tennis coach, but he's not called a tennis teacher. I started to wonder, and so did Dan, why are different people called different things and what's the difference? And I think my my thinking is that English teachers could become a bit more like him. The relationship that a tennis player has with their coach seems to me a kind of a good model for a direction to move English teachers in, one which is much closer, much more individualized, and one which includes elements like motivation and psychology as well. We'll come to that. So my kind of take on coaching, or when I think about coaching, that's what I think about, the idea of a sports coach as opposed to a teacher, someone who's actually rooting for the students and encouraging them and thinking about how to improve their performance, not just telling them information about tennis. This is a backhand, this is a forehand, and you played well or you didn't for this reason. There's more to it than that. Okay, that's kind of the idea. And these are the three questions. We'll talk a bit later about the GROW model of coaching, which you've probably come across, which I think is a great place to start. But here's kind of three questions I like to start with. Maybe you'd like to think about them as well, or an activity. So you think of a student you teach. It's very important you think of one student, not your class or a group of students, just one single student. And consider these three questions. The first question is, what do you know about their English language life? And by that I mean all the things they do in English that aren't in the class with you, which could be meeting people and speaking English, traveling and speaking English, reading or watching films in English, listening to songs, working in English, all sorts of things. An English language life is what is the term we use to describe everything students do in English. The lesson they have with us, or whoever they have a lesson with, if they do, is obviously part of that, but it's not all of it. And that's a key point, where traditional teaching seems to treat the student as somebody who is just learning English in a class. And if we haven't studied it in class, they don't know it. And perhaps there's not so much awareness of what they're using and doing outside class. So I think that's very important to consider. The second question is, what are their goals and how are they progressing in relation to these goals? So this is really a question to challenge you as a teacher about how much you know about your students. And the third question, given they've got these goals, what are the options they have to achieve them? Obviously, if they're doing a class with you, that's one of, they've chosen that option, but what are their other options? And what's stopping them reaching their goals or slowing them down? Depending on the student you've chosen to think about, the answer will be different. And what could they do to overcome these obstacles? So can you do that just for about a minute? Think about one student that you know, who you are teaching now or have taught recently, and think about the answers to those questions, okay? Now, I'm going to go and have a cough like Gabriella, okay? But I'm going to discreetly do it off screen, okay? I'll see you in a second, 1 minute. Is that okay? Actually, I need the chat bar here to know people are with me, or come back in your video, actually, why not? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes.
Sure, yeah,
How
that's
are you doing,
fine.
guys?
I can talk while you go and cough, or you can
You don't
just
have to talk, just make sure they're doing the work and not just going to the kitchen and making a cup of tea. Remember, you're thinking about one student.
one student, okay.
Those three questions. I'll be back in about a minute.
Okay. Please work hard. Okay. Truly interactive. I guess there are two more joiners that we cannot see, but
okay. Can they? Maybe I can sort of chat with them. Have a look. Let's have a look.
Yeah. Okay.
On the chat bar here, actually. Should
Mhm.
be at the top. I think you share pause, annotate.
Yeah. So it's there.
There we go.
Okay, got it. Mm-hmm.
Who is there? You guys on video.
Yeah. So
My
we're
first question is, did you find any of those questions difficult to answer about this student?
Slobodan and Anna. Okay. All right. There we are. Okay. Okay. Can you just type in your names and say a quick hello? Okay. And I just.
Slobodan Kelechevich, is that pronounced correctly? Anna Halas, Carrie, Judy. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Alessandra. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so we're about 6 or 7, yeah?
Yep.
I mean, feel free to either talk on the video, if you have a video, or continue to write in the chat bar. Did anyone find that difficult to do, or any of those questions difficult?
No.
You know all about your students' language life then, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What they do outside class, how they're progressing towards their goals and stuff, like good coaches. Okay, so the idea is to, I mean, when I've worked with teachers, this is a sort of an activity we do to raise awareness. A lot of people do find it quite difficult. They've got a class with a lot of people in and they've concentrated on delivering their class and teaching their teaching points, but perhaps a little bit less individuals involved and what they're doing, asking these questions at the beginning of the course and continuously. I don't know, Slobodan and who else came in there? What did you think of those questions? Are they ones you could easily answer for one of your students? Alessandra? Not difficult, but making us think. Okay. Judy says, I start working with clients with a ruthless assessment. What's a ruthless assessment?
About their skills and who they are and their goals and why don't you speak English now?
Yeah.
And these, we're so aligned, really. You know, what opportunities outside of our interaction do you have and things like that. And,
Okay.
and their strengths as a person. Are you funny in your first language? Are you confident in your first language? Are you nervous about speaking, public speaking, or are you a shy person? You know, that kind of thing.
So it does go back to a sort of, there's a needs analysis as part of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the follow-up as well, as we'll look at in a minute, how does this kind of pan out? In my experience of the teachers I am working with, often this happens in a school at the beginning of a course, for example, in October or sometime like that. These questions, or some of these questions get asked, but they only get asked once. And then we get back to just getting through the book and doing the exams. And so the teacher's focus is on completing what they call a syllabus, their syllabus. The thing they're meant to do, the B2 level course as laid down by their school. And there's not much reference to how this relates to the endeavor of the language student to improve their English, what part that plays in it, because presumably it's not their end in life to complete a B2 course. Their end is to do some things in English. So it kind of refocuses. This is what the coaching twist is. It's not a teaching endeavor really. For me, English learning is like trying to give up smoking or lose weight. It's the thing you want to do, and you might be successful and you might not, but you need to kind of follow up and measure and see how you're going. Let's have a look at another slide. Just going to check in the chat if there's any more. So I'm having to switch between windows here, bear with me. Moving from teacher to learner led. Yes, Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, it is more learner-led, I think. Or, I mean, I think learner-led sounds a bit like learner autonomy, and I have an issue with that because I don't think coaching a coach doesn't have to have autonomous students. They just have to take an interest in how they want to learn. So for me, if a student wants me to lead them, that's fine, as long as they're consenting to that. But I need to know where they're going. And again, taking the meta, I'll come back to you in a second, Judy. Let me just finish that point. So, like, imagine I want to give up smoking. I mean, you can get me involved, but if you've got some ideas that I can follow to the letter and that will help me give up smoking, I don't really care. I don't need to be autonomous or Duncan-centered about giving up smoking. I just need to give up smoking, and I'll get there one way or another, and it doesn't really matter. So for me, coaching isn't about getting people to do everything themselves. It's getting them to focus on, are they being successful or not? And if you can be successful by obeying orders, then do that. No. And if you're successful by making more decisions yourself, then do that. I mean, but in the end, you have to measure your success. Sorry, Judy, what did you want to say?
Well, before you go to another slide, I was looking at number 3, and something that I've noticed with the examples in the first course, the foundations course, and something that I've noticed a lot in my life is what's stopping them from reaching their goals is almost imaginary. It's some wrong thinking, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come to that, I think, in the next slide. That leads us
Okay.
in, Judy, because
I was afraid you were leaving it.
I won't leave it, honestly. These
okay.
For some reason, I'm stuck and I can't move there we go. Is that it? Yeah, Inner Game Theory, you may have come across. Timothy Galway was a famous tennis coach, and he wrote a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Is anyone familiar with that book?
I haven't read it, but I know everyone refers to it. That's the
everyone refers to it. I mean,
yeah.
It's a sort of one of the famous passages from it, which I'll just give you a moment to read. Okay, which is, I think this speaks to exactly what Judy was saying. And again, this for me is the coaching twist. The teaching idea is the external goal. Yeah, you want to pass this exam, you want to finish this course, you want to get to this level. But a lot of students, their problem isn't that goal hasn't been set, or they don't know what they need to do, but there are all these obstacles. Fear, self-doubt, lapses in focus, and limiting concepts or assumptions. I mean, who hasn't felt that? Everyone identifies with that, and that's most of your students, and that's you as well, and me, when we're trying to do stuff. That is definitely me in my yoga class. Believe me, someone with more fear, self-doubt, and limiting concepts you couldn't have. I just have no confidence that I can do yoga at all. I make excuses about my lack of flexibility, my age, the fact I can't, my gender, I can't do it because I'm a man and I'm not flexible. I make all these excuses all the time. So I think that the yoga teacher has a big challenge to kind of keep me interested. And I think a lot of students are like that with English as well. Yeah. The point is to overcome these things, and these need to be talked about, and why not? So that, again, the needs analysis isn't just about, well, do you need to speak more or listen more? What do you do at work in English? The typical one. It's about, have you tried to learn English before? What are your chances? Were you successful? How confident do you feel now on a scale of 1 to 10 about being successful? Where do you want to be in 6 months' time? Are you going to get there? What's going to stop you? This kind of conversation, I think, has to take place along the lines Timothy, I think, is implying here. I mean, this is interesting. This is, again, going back to how coaches react with tennis players. You have it inside you, but now we have to find our daily routines again, says Marianne. Now we have to face these tough moments. How many times do we as teachers say that to our English students? Or are we just explaining the present perfect and giving pair work practice in this, that, or the other? That's my question. That's the coaching twist, or one part of it anyway. You're probably familiar with the GROW model, and that really reflects the questions we did before. You know, you start with the reality. What can you do at the moment, and what can't you do? What's your current level? And you've got the European framework and descriptors for that, or all sorts of ways of having that conversation. The goal is then, where do you want to go with your English? And that can be developed with, these are example questions, but I think you can have more. And then that's normally what happens with a needs analysis. It stops there, I think, a traditional one. The one I prefer then talks about exactly the O's, the opportunities and the obstacles. It's not just about coming to class. And if it is just about coming to class, what are your different options about coming to class? And what else can you do to practice on your own? And when and how and who with? And what can you do to improve your English? And how will you know you're getting better? You know, people talk about the intermediate plateau, and students at B1 or B2 get very despondent, and a year later say, well, I don't think I'm getting any better. So what have we done as coaches to make sure they understand they are better? Have you taken a video of your student, or has the student videoed themselves with their phone in October and then looked at it again in December or in April to see how much they've improved in English? Is that kind of thing happening? And then the obstacles that Timothy was talking about. Are you confident you can succeed? And this is where, you know, you kind of have to squeeze out all the doubts and address them, I think. And from that, you can get a way forward. So it's a kind of more complete needs analysis that goes on and on and on and throughout. And it doesn't have to be a conversation between the teacher and the student, I think. It could be modeled by a teacher with a student as a demo, but it also can be between two students. There's no reason why two students can't coach each other by using this structure, starting to write down some answers, interview each other, talk about things, and then maybe revisit them on a monthly basis or a termly basis and see where they're going with those. So that's certainly an activity I think you can integrate in any course, whether it's a group course or an individual course. But it needs to be a habit, not just a kind of thing that's done at the beginning to set a direction. It needs to become habitual thinking, really, and habitually referred to. So I'll pause there because I think I've done about 2 or 3 slides. Any questions, either video-wise or or chat-wise, excuse me? Oops, all right. Hello, any questions? Sorry, I can't quite find my chat box here. Why am I not doing that?
We don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay, any questions on the video that you want to, or does anyone want to ask anything? Or
I have a question. I mean, you've got a lot of experience working with teachers. How do teachers respond to starting to think like about the inner thoughts, what the learner actually thinks about their learning? So I find that a very unusual thing for teachers to actually start to apprehend, you know, just to think about the learner.
yeah, I mean, there's mixed reactions. Some people are enthusiastic and see it in that way. Others will naturally see difficulties and objections. I'm not a therapist. It's not up to me. I just have to teach the class, the material, the content I deliver. They take it, and that's up to them to coach themselves or organize their lives. And I can understand that's a perfectly feasible standpoint. Yeah, I'm just a bit of product like anything else. I mean, they can watch a film in English. It's not up to the people who made that film to check their English. We're all just usable substance for the English learner. But except that the learner is paying us as a professional. And what are they paying us for? And in the future, when the robots start getting a bit smarter, we have to think about what we as teachers can do that the robots can't. And that's exactly the question. I think the emotional side will be the last one that the robots can deal with. They will, I mean, Alexa now, I did an experiment the other day with my daughter. Have you got Alexa or Google, Fred, or, you know, where you ask them questions?
No, I don't. Maybe the others.
Have you ever used those things? Ask Alexa or
Yes. Yes.
the Google one? She's called something else, isn't she? Can't remember now. Anyway, you can ask them questions like, yeah, what's a comparative structure? Or what's the English word for this in Spanish? And Alexa can tell you the answer. She's quite good at explaining things. But if you ask her about anything to do with motivation or why you're not making progress, obviously she struggles. She'll say things like, I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. Which is a sign to me that if she can't answer it, that's where I can add value and charge people money. Increasingly, it's hard for me to justify charging money to give people gap fills with grammar exercises, certainly, or even teaching vocabulary. I mean, it needs to, I think, or there's an option. If you give your teaching a coaching twist, it gives it much more value to the students.
It will become more relevant because it's addressing exactly what they need.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, looking up certain aspects of, you know, present perfect tense or whatever it is, that's a general issue.
Yeah.
Related to learning.
Exactly. And I think what I haven't seen teachers do yet, and I don't see on training courses, is precisely that. Teacher and the student says, can you explain the difference between the present perfect and the simple past? And what does nearly every single teacher in the world do at that point?
They start giving you examples. They look up things in the book, whatever.
They answer the question, don't they? Like their Alexa. Yeah. What teacher ever says, no, I'm not going to explain that to you. Go and look it up later on if you're interested. We're going to do something else which I think is more useful and relevant to the situation. Nobody ever does that. So
yeah.
That's a move from being a teacher to a coach, I think, thinking about the end goal. I could talk about that, but it's not the best use of time.
Right.
And of course, it's quite interesting when you think about other endeavors. I mean, I mentioned before how, you know, for me, a coaching approach is a bit like approaching a language as if it was trying to give up smoking or lose weight. If you go to something called Weight Watchers, which I don't know if you have in every culture. In British culture, there's a place called Weight Watchers where you go if you want to lose weight. It's like a club. Are you familiar with that kind of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when you go to Weight Watchers, you don't sit there not eating or eating slimming foods. You actually talk about your strategies, you weigh yourself, and you encourage people and you set goals. That's exactly what Weight Watchers is, I think. It's not, you don't actually lose weight during that time you're there. Now, of course, a language class isn't exactly like that because you can improve your English in that hour, but it's very useful to use it as a time for measuring, thinking, strategizing, planning, organizing, comparing with other people, and generally kind of motivating yourself. That actually, to me, is a good way to use at least some of the class time. Again, that's the coaching twist. We're going to do a little bit of that, not just what did we learn today, but how is your English progressing? You've been here 3 months. What's the difference between now and 3 months ago? Keep asking that question. Just like the Weight Watchers keep saying, how much do you weigh now? And how much did you weigh 3 months ago? Giving up smoking. How many cigarettes are you smoking? How many were you smoking 3 months ago? These are the questions that I think are, for me, coaching questions, if you like, or nagging.
Hello.
Anyway, that's the idea. So, I mean, this slide really just suggests or gets you to think about how you might incorporate that grow conversation with the students you have. Because it's one thing to say, you might think, well, I wouldn't do that. But if you do think, well, yeah, Duncan, that's quite a good idea, then you have to think, well, when? Who would do?
Can I make a comment?
Sure, yeah.
A word that we're saying over and over and over, we've already said it more than 10 times, is think. And teaching has been a lot of don't think, you know, do what you're told. And you say, think about this or no, you know, and even in, I mean, just a light bulb went off for me, a bolt of lightning, when you got the students to coach each other, like do the grow model with each other. Yeah. Like you're literally making them think, but you had to think first to go that direction with them. And none of this is stuff that we were learned or encouraged to do. So I'm just watching this whole industry and their autonomy, our autonomy, and theirs grow. Oh, well, there's a bit of a whatever.
There
Sorry.
you go.
Yeah, it's the thinking.
Yes. Well, it's the idea of having direction as well. I think a lot of English teaching is fairly directionless.
Yes, or something comes up and you go, no, it isn't. Like, sound it out. You go, yeah, I remember as a child thinking, you can't sound it out. Or sound it out is why I can't read. I could read really quickly, but and really young, because I didn't do that. Because I didn't do as I was told, which I've often not done as I was told. But, you know, but it was from mindfully going, you can't sound that out. You know, you can't do it. So it's the thinking. So we're probably all thinkers, you know. Wait a second. Challenging. And it could be true or not true. I accept it or I don't accept it or I modify it. But I think about it all. But we're not trained to do that. We're trained to follow or accept or regurgitate or something.
Yes,
so this
exactly.
is very exciting for me, this industry and this group and this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, goals is a goal is a key word for me in coaching as well. The idea that it's going somewhere. You don't go to the gym to attend the gym. You go there because you want to reach a level of fitness or body shape or whatever it is. And the same with English. I think some people sign up for classes just as a kind of, well, I'm doing English classes, but they don't really think, as you say.
They don't really think through. I often, I was just thinking, you asked when to use this GROW model or the similar questions that are, you know, put together in the GROW model. And I was speaking to you earlier, and what I did all this week, I'm starting off students working with teachers, and I'm doing the first initial class, irrespective of what language they're learning, and I'm coaching them 90 minutes per group or per person if it's an individual, and it's just so fabulous, and it just sets off the whole course at a completely different level of awareness. And they start thinking that what the reaction is always, oh, that's a good question, nobody's asked me that. Nobody's asked them, you know, what kind of successes are you bringing from your learning, from your previous learning? And they're like, oh, I never thought of that, you know, so you can transfer these skills.
Well, yes, exactly. We'll come to that in a second. I want to show you a few more slides before we finish, just to have a little bit more to chew on. I mean, we use this acronym, the coaching MOP, motivate, organize, and practice, because those are the three things I think the teacher or the coach should be doing. The motivation we've talked about, that was the Timothy Galway, inspiring, motivating, and noting when people are struggling and dealing with that as well. Seeing when people aren't doing their homework and taking an interest. Taking an interest when students don't come to class, in finding out why. A number of times I've talked to teachers and they tell me, well, this student hasn't come, and well, do you know why? And they say, well, I don't know why, and then it's not my problem, you know. Well, no, but yes, it is, because it's your job to teach the people who come, or is your job to get all the people who've paid for a course as far as they can? I mean, or this again is a teaching versus coaching, if you like, to put it crudely, concept. Organizing as well. Again, students have a lot of great ideas, but they don't get organized. They promise to themselves and to you they're going to do lots of homework, lots of practice, watch loads of films in English, go away for the weekend, get an English boyfriend, whatever it is. They have these great ideas and then they don't do them. Like people trying to give up smoking or lose weight. We tend to, we're only human, but that's not really always addressed, is it? And it's and practice as well. The motivation ramp, I think, comes into it as well, thinking about that first role of the coach. I mean, in this text, which you can briefly read, it's my colleague Dan's attempts to prepare for a marathon. So have a quick read of it and then I'll comment on it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is, again, we're comparing learning English to learning, or learning a language to other endeavors. Relatedness, the idea is if you've got the ramp, you're going to probably succeed. If you've got one of these missing, you might not. So for example, in this case, relatedness is the fact that he did it with someone else. And that's very motivating. And that's why students come to class and want a teacher. They don't want to do it on their own. Agency, they're deciding stuff. He decided what his schedule would be. He decided to enter for the race. Mastery, the M of the ramp, is the idea that you know you're getting better. And this is the thing we were talking about earlier. How many times are students watching videos of themselves that prove they are getting better, or doing progress tests, or looking back to the work they've done a few months before and seeing the improvement? Just like in the gym where you're on the machine, it's telling you what your time was and if it's better or worse. This is mastery. And purpose, the idea of it's leading somewhere. Is it the first certificate exam? Is it something you have to do at your work, a presentation? Or in this case, is it, you know, running the marathon or the half marathon? So if you've got all those four, you're good to go. But what happens if you haven't got one of those? And this is what often happens in language classes. You know, they have maybe the relatedness and the agency and the mastery, but there's no purpose. It's kind of general English course that just dwindles on to some kind of test in June that doesn't really seem to go anywhere. Or perhaps they've got a purpose. They're trying to pass an IELTS exam, but there's not really any relatedness. They don't seem to have any interaction with the other members of the group or the teacher. It's not like that. Or they're being told what to do all the time. They're not choosing any of the activities themselves, or they don't see themselves progressing. So that's the idea. And I think you can do this activity again with students, get them to read something like this, think about something they've achieved, and then think about their English and whether their English has all those elements in it. And it's another way of sort of having a coaching conversation with students, and students having them with each other, and to start to see where things are missing. And what's missing isn't that, well, we haven't done the third conditional yet. That's not the point. What the point is, one of these things might be missing if they're not progressing, I think. Activities. I mean, this one we did, when I first started writing the book with Dan, we did this with our students, and I was it was a revelation to me how excited they got. It was a very simple thing. Each Monday they were like doing a fairly intensive class. They came from Monday to Thursday for 2 hours for 4 weeks. And so on Mondays, I would just get them to make some kind of plans for the week about what they were going to do in their English life outside class. And they would share these with other people. And then they'd come back the next Monday and talk about what they had done and what they hadn't done. And they'd report on that. And this was fantastic because there was peer motivation. They'd get a bit competitive. Also, they didn't want to turn up with nothing. Of course, sometimes they did have less and they would have to explain that. So all the conversation about the limiting beliefs or the lack of organization would come out in the conversation between the students. They would also get ideas from each other. They would talk about films they'd seen. Oh, you went to the cinema. Was it useful for our level? I always think it's too difficult in the original version. No, this film's very good. You can watch it with the subtitles, etc., etc. They would have these conversations. So, and that went on, and it, to me, was a revelation that just something like that could get students interested. And again, it's peer coaching more than you having to do it. Obviously, the teacher can offer ideas, but again, it gets them to think about coaching themselves. They can do this. I mean, Operation Success is an activity that they can do over the whole year, where they make huge resolutions for sort of 200 hours of English and what they're going to do. But that's more difficult. That's very hardcore. I mean, here's an example of Marta's kind of resolution. This is the idea that the Common European Framework says if you do 200 hours, you'll get to the next level. So she's invented 200 hours of an English life that will get her from B1 to B2 or whatever it is, with different kind of things. And depending on the students you have, that may be relevant as well. At least, even if they don't follow through on everything, it gets them to think about the kind of commitment and lifestyle and habits they need to develop. Again, this is like diet and gym. It's language learning isn't anything more fancy than that. It's just getting the right habits, I think, and putting in the hours. And some of those can be in class, as she has 90 of her 200 hours, as you can see there. So another variation on that is Mission Not Impossible, where the students, well, you can start by setting them little missions for each day, like these little 5-10 minute activities. And then when they get in the rhythm, they actually start setting each other challenges. It's almost like having an app. There probably is an app to do this now, but if there isn't, there should be. So they're little challenges in English, and again, they can sort of reflect on whether they've done them or not. Get some thinking about that motivation, recording themselves. I mean, that's a kind of procedure, if you like, for doing something that, again, is fairly obvious, but hardly ever happens. Teachers are still giving, in my experience, gap fill exercises for homework when they could be getting their students to do something like this. They've got a phone. Well, why are you doing a gap fill when you could go home and record a video of yourself talking in English, using the present perfect if you want? But I mean, it seems bonkers to me that it's 2020 and we seem to, in some way, still be teaching as if it was 1920. So these activities are trying to sort of, this slide kind of sort of summarizes what the teaching focus and the coaching focus is really in.
You're going too fast.
I am, aren't I? I'm aware that I said I'd finish in 45 minutes. We can go back. I'm going to stop and we can go back, okay? Because we're nearly there. Look, that's the end of it. So what I want to do is give you a taste of all the stuff there, and then you can say, forget that slide. I just want to talk about that one.
Okay.
What's your question, Judy? Or what do you want to get back?
It's just about stuff that's coming up for me. So way back at the peer motivation. So it's the declaration. It's saying to another person, I'm going to train. I'm going to whatever. And then they'll hold you accountable for it. How was that movie? What did you think about it? Was it too hard? Did you watch it to the end? Should I watch it? And again, that's the, I mean, it's the autonomy. That student supporting student, but that human thing of declaring to someone else. So whether they're your partner or not, say, I'm going to order whatever. So it just holds you, or worse, or to the nth degree, is put it on the fridge and see it every day. I made this. It's about integrity. It's about accountability. It's about, so all kinds of other things are getting, elements are working together that aren't there really in a classroom.
Yes.
In the same way, I think.
Accountability is the word that I take from that. I mean, you said it twice, and rightly so. I think that's the motivation. When we become accountable, we've told someone we're going to give up smoking. So because they say, how's it going with the giving up the smoking?
You're going to ask me.
Damn. And that's exactly what a coach does. After all, you pay the coach because each week you go there and tell him or her how you haven't done what you're supposed to do. Or you do it because you know you don't want to turn up empty-handed, as it were, and the students students can weave that into their life. They don't need to professionalize it necessarily. They just need to make a habit of making these declarations, as you say, making them public, and enjoying them and laughing about it. We're human. Obviously, we don't expect to be perfect, but in the end, the peer motivation and the nudging works, I think.
Yep, you can just totally see how that supports them with their goals and their autonomy. It's really excellent.
I really like these activities. They're really, like Slobodan said, that they're really hands-on. They're so practical and they're simple. I mean, it's nothing to it. You put down your week.
Yeah.
And you just think of, okay, what do you plan to do every day, just a few minutes? Or if you've got like this Operation Success, which we can see on the screen, it's like, okay, what kind of activities? It can be a checklist like this, or they can go off and put it together for themselves. I don't know how you executed this. So did the student themselves put this together, or did you kind of talk it through?
Well, they kind of put it together. Maybe there was a brainstorm of different ideas. And then it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's different ways of doing it. It will depend on the students, how much input they need at the beginning. But as you said, it's well, as Stephen Covey says, I love his quote, maybe common sense, but it's not common practice, which is what Dan is referring to there. The idea that I think we overcomplicate things in TEFL a lot of the time. We look for fancy activities. What can I give them that's a really motivating, interesting, wacky and weird activity to do? But that's not what's required. You just need to do fairly standard things regularly. Just talk to your friends in English. Record yourself on a phone. You don't need a very complicated activity to do that, or prompt or material. You just need the organization and the commitment and the accountability. Those are the things that matter, not the fanciness of the activity.
Sure, yeah.
Or the gamification of the activity, or the stuff
I
that
believe in it.
in my lifetime seems to have focused on. It's all about, it's got to be like something really weird. And no, because most of us, when we speak our own language, we don't talk about very original things. We just kind of do life stuff, but we do it in that language. And that's all they need to do in English. They don't need to, you know, do anything fancy. They just need to do stuff regularly.
Yeah, and I think this accountability thing is what makes us completely different to, you know, a Alexa or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be responding with feelings, with empathy, with, you know, questions that a computer cannot, you know, come up with, whatever amount of data they have in their background, because it's not what they're conditioned to do. And teachers are not conditioned to tap into their emotional or their you know, reaching out and bridging that, you know, there's always this space between you and the student. And it shouldn't be there, because that's where all the magic should be happening.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, in my own experience of learning to sing, I mentioned yoga before, but singing's not easy for me either. And I've had 3 singing teachers, and the first 2 were very good. They were good teachers. And the second one was very encouraging, and the first one was encouraging, and they knew their stuff and they knew about scales, but the third one knew about me. And she knew exactly what I needed to do. And she focused exactly on where I needed to go from where I was to another place. She wasn't just saying, this is singing, you need to get there, a kind of deficit model, if you like. She started where I was and she moved me forward. And it was a tremendous experience. And I thought, she is a coach. And she actually calls herself a singing coach. Again, back to that idea of, does it matter what the word is, teacher, coach? But I did feel she was a coach rather than a teacher, in the sense her expertise in teaching, in coaching, in singing wasn't in doubt. But the difference was her ability not just to reproduce good singing and model it for me, it was to take me as a learner and push me to the place I needed to go to, which is what a coach does, by setting me goals, by encouraging me, by cheering me on. I mean, she was the football coach sometimes in the middle of scales. She was going, yeah, good. You know, she would kind of, how many English teachers do that? In the middle of a conversation, do we sort of come up to the pair of students and say, you know, and really encourage them and tell them it's great and they're talking really fluently and well?
But why? Can you tell me why? Because this roots in teacher training principle, I think. Why is that we're not saying, oh, that's really good, I really like that?
I don't know.
What's the focus? What's the focus in teaching?
I think it's too intellectual, Gabriella. That's what it is. No.
Look
back, I think it's been intellectualized strongly.
There's a very easy answer to that. I mean, you said that we don't, as teachers, we don't generally encourage, and we're not, you know, talking about, you know, how good that conversation was, because what we're focusing on is, oh, there's a mistake. Oh, watch out with your pronunciation. Yeah. We're always troubleshooting, you know, trouble spotting.
Well, I don't know if it's a teaching thing or a human thing, but it's easier for us to criticize and say, God, I like your nails, or, you know, to the checkout girl. So as positive things occur in our life, we just don't stand there and say, you look great today, or you know, we're not. So
we're conditioned to feel it,
and I'll talk to you
about it.
Your life coaching after that. I got more of that from a life coaching course. So, but it was awareness. It was just mindfully saying, why is it that we're more comfortable saying a negative thing or criticism, or even if it's constructive criticism, if it isn't asked for, it's criticism, you know, instead of all the positive things that we know or notice. So it's kind of a human thing. That's where
it's exactly that, Judy. I think it's the difference between the technical thing, which is the language. I can talk about that, whether it's correct or incorrect, and the person. And that's where the encouragement comes. We have to engage with the learner as a person, the human.
Right, engagement, sure.
And we don't feel confident, possibly because that hasn't been in our training either, or it's not the tradition of Western education.
Right.
It's with content, isn't it? It's deliver. They still use the word, well, in English, the word deliver is used to describe teachers as if they're postmen. I mean, I'm shocked. But in the last 20 years, they used to say, yeah, we're delivering level 3 maths or whatever. And yet, can you deliver this? Like, what? Why on earth would you use the word deliver to describe growth and education?
Because
Flowers you don't deliver flowers and turn them into plants. You don't deliver seeds that turn into trees. I mean, it's just bonkers to me. But there's an obsession, and I think it goes back to the 20th century, mechanization and industrialization, and the idea that knowledge was the thing, and it's about things being right and wrong.
It's about this standardized approach to something which shouldn't be, and it's not individualized. Even when they talk about, you know, personalizing stuff, it's not personal. It's still textbook based. It's still based on, you know, reaching 84% or whatever.
Yes.
It's not about how much have you developed from where you were.
No,
We're not starting from the person. We're still starting from an external, you know, expectations.
Yeah, it's all about the thing and not about the person, which for me, ultimately, coaching is a human endeavor, whereas teaching, I think, is a technical one. Well, to put it crudely, that's where I see the difference. The coaches are more responding to people as human beings rather than kind of part of a process of learning a technical.
It's more humanistic or holistic or whatever word you want to use. Sure.
Yeah. It's human. That's why it kind of makes sense to me. We're coming to, we have to come to a close now, I think. We're getting to 9 o'clock by 2 minutes, but you've sort of had time for questions, I think. If you've got any more, you know, you can email me or get this PowerPoint or even download this book. Why don't you? You'll never spend a better €5 in your life.
I wondered when your tipping point was. When did you notice that you were coaching, not teaching, or, you know, more into that spectrum or doing things differently?
An interesting question.
Just a personal story. I just wondered about you.
I think I was a frog in boiling water. I just didn't notice, and suddenly it kind of, or the opposite of that, a frog in water getting colder and more pleasant. Suddenly it was all nice, and I can't really remember at what point. I guess it's gradual. I mean, I can remember 30 years ago when I first started teaching, being that teacher I'm describing now, or in the negative way. And I know I'm not that person now, but somewhere in between, I suppose bits and pieces came in. But I can't say a tipping point, Judy, or I can't think of one, but I'll try and think of one. It'd be nice if there was a story, you know. But that's more of an American movie. You know, I realized that day when he said that to me that everything changed.
I love that.
But I'm not American. I don't have the advantage of being able to call on those very telling anecdotes.
Oh boy. Those of you who are very quiet, any kind of, we do need to wrap up because I promised 60 minutes is 60 minutes, but any takeaways or anything that you really thought was useful, thought-provoking, or made you think in a different way about what you were doing or what your learners are doing? If you could just unmute yourselves or just write in the chat box. Slobodan, Alessandra.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that, you know, in the end, what would make a difference is the relationship that, you know, as teachers, coaches, we will, you know, establish with our students. I mainly teach right now one-to-one lessons or very small groups. So for me, it's, you know, I see it every day that, you know, the better, the stronger the relationship is, the better, you know, the learning can be. So, yeah. And plus this thing about Alexa, or, you know, people now can find information or English, you know, anywhere. There are a lot of apps that, you know, students or learners can listen to, but, you know, a relationship with a teacher coach, you know, you can't find it, you know, online. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a human endeavor.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Others, any comments? Yeah, Anna is saying thank you. Yeah,
I'd like to just say a big thank you to Duncan for sharing these great ideas from his own experience. And I just have to say that I definitely see a lot of these activities. And by the way, I got your book like a few weeks ago, and I think it's great. I haven't finished it, I have to admit, but I think it's a great thing. And I believe that they can really be used as a great tools, kind of exiting strategy, moving away from more traditional teaching that we were, trained to do back, before. But now we can take it as really something and move towards something much more beneficial for our students. So yeah, really, I admire everything that you wrote there and told us this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Slobodan, for the feedback. Glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, I'm just typing in that the slides and the recording will be available.
Yeah. Well, you have them, don't you, Gabriella? So you can just publish them straight up, yeah?
Yeah.
No, except
yeah, we'll be sending it in email, so we'll have those available. Okay. And I don't know if there's anything else or anyone else would like to comment, or we kind of wrap it up for today, and just keep in touch. I mean, those of you who are watching the recording, then definitely send us an email either to us at ILCA or to Duncan by email. Judy's saying excellent, so good. And we'd kind of wrap this up, and we're very grateful, and I'm personally very honored to be learning from Duncan. I know he's got much more experience in what he's been doing than me. And yeah, I really like the stories, the yoga, the music, because they kind of bring it all home, so it's, yeah, that's how people work. I mean, if you get that personalized attention, then there's going to be some kind of result moving you forward. Right? Yeah.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
Well, next time I'll do some singing for you, and you'll be able to judge for yourself what.
And yoga.
And yoga.
Singing yoga.
On camera.
On
yes.
camera. Yes, definitely.
Namaste.
Okay. We had the upside down, so. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Okay. If you go, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm.